Anything?
Yeah, now you're good.
Holy cow, we are live as of right now. And my microphone is being goofy for the audience in case I become silent. That's what's going on.
Oh, we just lost you again.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
so here, let tag
Anything?
team. Not mine. I'm up now. So I think what Jonathan is saying is, welcome to our live stream here. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking. We're going to be continuing the information we've been sharing regarding one, why the federal government contracting industry is such a great market space for first time entrepreneurs, and then secondly, how to get your foot in the door. And this is the quick and dirty, politically incorrect content that you got to know in order to be able to get your fishing line in the water. And it's not nearly as hard as what people think it is. It really isn't. And Jonathan, you want to give a sound check? Are you
Can you
good?
hear me?
Nope, you're still out. And so wiggle a little bit more, and so we'll see where we are. But in the meantime, I'm just going to jump right into a very quick review in case you missed last week's, and then we will go from there. So let's go with share screen, entire screen, boom, and let's go over here to webinar series 2. So what I'm going to do is hopefully you can see this. Again, this is not. I'm not going to blood you with the presentation, so I want to keep it in PowerPoint mode so we can jump around quite a bit. So again, this right here is webinar 2 of 4, and it's this one we're going to talk about. Give them what they want. So what do we mean by this? What we're discussing is a part 2 of a 4-part startup strategy. The very first one is you got to define your company, and what I mean by that is one, you got to make the commitment to do it. The very first thing you got to know is that one, you'll never be ready to launch a company. You'll never know enough. There's always more that you need to do. So, what does that mean? That means today is the perfect time to start your company because you'll never be ready. So why not do it today? And learning by doing is the fastest, most effective way to learn. What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, you're going to get your ego bruised. That's it. And you learn from that. So the very first thing is you got to get started. The second thing is you got to determine what your markets are. And we're talking about both your vertical and your horizontal markets. Don't fish off the pier like everybody else. Don't pick a company that doesn't align with your goals. Those are obvious things to say, but most of the people that I work with, their companies are failing because of that. They want to become a billionaire, or they launch a company that's more aligned with trying to become a billionaire, which is very big reward, but also very low probability. So they're trying to create a new technology. They're going to try to sell a new widget or gadget to the government. And I'm telling you, that is a very low probability way to do it. Some folks, they overthink it. They say, hey, I want to make about $300,000-$400,000 a year and have more flexibility with my own time. Boom. Easy to do. You become a 1099. Hire another employee under your umbrella company, and now you're skimming off the top of your embedded team. So you're doing the same work that you've been doing as an individual contributor, and then the next thing you know, you've got employees that you're making profit off of, also that you are actually leading on a subcontract. Not that very difficult to do, but yet, you're making $400,000 or $500,000, once you start getting a couple of employees and you're skimming off the top of their compensation, because that's what you set. And, so there's lots of different strategies out there. You got to pick the strategy and the market spaces that align with your goals. Now, my goal was to become, independently wealthy, financially set. You know what I mean? I had a magic number, and I thought if I make that magic number, then I don't have to worry about money for the rest of my life. My kids don't have to worry about money for the rest of their life. So I developed a strategy, and I call it an equity-based strategy because I had to create equity in my company to sell it in order to be able to get that magic number. Now, that strategy required that I win sexy contracts with sexy customers, so my company would have value to a potential buyer. Now, and I had some very specific reasons for wanting that. But if I was a younger person and I didn't have these very specific reasons that a lot of people wouldn't have, hey, I would have been just as happy to say, you know what though, I can get there just by increasing my earning income. And so I'd say, hey, I'm happy. I just want to make $800,000 a year. And if I do that long enough, guess what? I'm going to get my other goal too of, reaching financial independence. But I could have done it in a lower, I could have done it in a higher probability way. So again, each goal type that you have has a very specific strategy that aligns with it. So that's kind of what we talked about, last week is one, you got to get started. This right here can be your corporate office. It was for my first company for over 4 years. That, hey, wherever I carried that thing, it was my global headquarters. So that's what I did. I had this around. I kept all the information that I needed right there. And guess where I worked out of? Boom, Starbucks. And it was literally that easy. And the other thing that you got to be aware of is this has got to be an iterative process. If you're wasting your time creating a business plan, you're probably being very inefficient. So what we're really doing is we're really following a framework that I used. Again, I struggled to get my first company off the ground until I used a framework instead of a business plan. Business plans didn't help me at all. They didn't help me think. It was something I downloaded from the internet, and I created all the obligatory sections, but it didn't help me think through problems. This framework, this business model did. And the very first thing I had to do is I had to dream. And very first thing I had to do is, as part of that, is I had to believe that I could accomplish it. And then once I did that, then I had to take my dream and I had to equate that into personal goals. And then once I had a personal goal, then what I had to do is I had to analyze, what was the best company, what was the best strategy, what were the best markets to do that. So once I converted my dream into a personal goal, then I had to do an analysis. And that analysis, I used a 4-perspective analysis. I used my perspective. I used the market's perspective. I used the bigger picture, or I would say the entire industry perspective. And I also used the customer's, perspective. So I looked at it from 4 different ways, and I kind of translated those into my personal goals, market demand, competition, and capabilities. And the perfect company is essentially the intersection of those 4 areas: your personal goals, your capabilities, your competition, and also, the market demand. Now, this is actually the scale, in my opinion. Everybody gets caught up in the fact that, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do all these different things. That is the least important aspect of it. The least important aspect of defining your company is your capabilities. Why? Because you're not going to be doing the work. You're the CEO. I tell people that just because you're you're a plumber and you want to launch a plumbing company, your job, as soon as you decide to launch the company, completely changes. It completely changes, because when you launch a company, now you become the CEO. So you need to do CEO jobs, not plumbing jobs. What do you have to do? Well, you've got to create infrastructure for your company. You got to do business development. You've got to, you've got to compete. You've got to come up with competitive discriminators. You got to create corporate maturity. You're doing all these different things. It has nothing to do with plumbing. That's the good news. That is the good news, is that because your personal abilities has such a small role in your company's success, you don't need to sweat that. Like, for example, Hell, I was bidding on cybersecurity, and I could barely spell cybersecurity. My very first prime contract that was worth $15 million that I netted over $5 million in profit off of, it was in logistics. Again, I'm not even sure I could spell logistics to this very day. I had no logistics knowledge. So your capabilities aren't that important. These other ones, they become increasingly important. Your competition. Oh, can you differentiate yourself from your competitors? Because differentiation is wildly important when you're starting out. When you're starting out, you've got to be able to compete. And if you can't differentiate from the existing embedded competition, then you're probably going to be hurting a little bit. Same way with market demand. You can sell the best widget in the world, but unless people are wanting to buy the widget, it doesn't matter. You've got to identify markets, both vertical and horizontal. Vertical markets are the ones that are customer centric. Like, I want to pursue intelligence community customers. Okay, that's a vertical market. Horizontal markets would be like, I want to do cybersecurity. I don't care who I do it for. I just want to do cybersecurity, period. And a vertical market, getting back to the vertical market says, I don't care what the hell I do in the intelligence community. I just want to be supporting that customer. So that's the difference between vertical and horizontal market. But as you can see here in this graphic, it's all about personal goals. Your personal goals, what you want to get out of your company, is the number one driver in the kind of company you should be launching. So, talking a little bit more about markets. What your markets do is they help you create accounts or account plans. Now, everybody has their own personal definition of what an account plan is. I'm going to dumb it down, and I'm going to make it really, really, really simple and understandable for everybody, because this is the way I understand it. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. An account is nothing more than a strategy to sell a specific service or good to a specific customer. So these yellow boxes right here, these would be accounts. And, because you have to create a specific strategy to be successful. If I wanted to sell, go ahead. Are you there, Jonathan?
Can you hear me? Anything?
Let me stop sharing and get back just to see if you're still there.
Nope. Are you able to hear you?
I can't hear you.
I give up.
Can anybody else hear Jonathan? I think he got a loose wire. I really do. I think something's. So I need to get paid overtime for this thing, double time, because I'm talking enough for both of us here. But anyway, so that's a good wrap up of what we discussed last week. This week is, you got to give people what they want. And this is, let me get back here going, and I'll check back in on you there here in a second. So share screen, boom. Let's go entire screen, boom, share. So now let's get back up here. So now the next question is now that you've got your company defined, what you're going to sell and who you want to sell it to, you've got your goals established, you've got a strategy to grow that company. Well, the very first step in everybody's company is going to be market penetration. Market penetration, the most realistic way you're going to get market penetration is through subcontracting opportunities. Now, you can go to Northrop Grumman and say, hey, give me a subcontract, and they're going to laugh at you. And here's why. Because you didn't help them win it. Now, why in the world are they ever going to give you a piece of the pie that they won themselves without having you done any of the, provided any of the blood, sweat, and tears to do that? So the way you get a subcontract is you reach Northrop Grumman before they bid on that request for proposal, and you join their bid team. That way you're contributing to the bid effort, and you want to do that. Why? because they're going to teach you how to write a proposal. You're actually going to be in the back seat observing an industry leader and how they're doing it. And if you're comfortable doing this, and I certainly was, hey, maybe you get some proposal content. Hey, if it was good enough for Northrop Grumman, it's probably good enough for you to chop up and use piecemeal. So it's very, very, very important that you kind of do this. Everybody is that I work with, their initial inclination is to just say, hey, I want money now. I want a subcontract. To hell with waiting around, and bidding on something. Just give me instant gratification. It just doesn't work that way. Nobody's going to give you something that you didn't help earn. And even if Northrop Grumman wanted to, they have a small business team that joined Northrop Grumman as bid partners who did invest that blood, sweat, and tears into winning that effort. And you better believe me, they'll have a mutiny on their hands if they see Northrop Grumman giving some Johnny come lately work that could be going to them. They're going to say, whoa, time out, Northrop Grumman. Where the hell were these people when we were writing this proposal? They weren't here. Why are you going to give them work that could be done by a small business to them who didn't earn a damn bit of it when we're here? And we did earn it. And that's a compelling argument that these small businesses are going to win 99% of the time. So they're gonna keep you from getting free work, basically, because they earned it and they want it and they're going to get it. So that's what you got to do is you got to figure out what these bid partners want and you got to give it to them. Now the question is what do they want? Well, let's see if I got a slide in here that kind of shows you some issues here. Let's go down to here. Now this is a little dated. This is from 2020, but it happens to be in the slide deck. Look at the goals that they have, for this is prime contracting and this is subcontracting. So let's look at the bottom half here. Let's look at this section right here. Look at service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. Look what their goals are for each one of these categories. So let's just, I'll make it easy to understand here. Every single time a large business bids on something, they have to have, that's really large. They have to have a small business utilization plan. And that means that 29.43% of all the work that they're doing on that contract's got to be done by a small business. But the government, they also want to have certain types of work going to certain types of businesses, small businesses, to be guaranteed certain work share. And those are women-owned small businesses, small disadvantaged businesses, which are minority-owned businesses for the most part, service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and hub zones. So let's take a look at what these goals are. It's 5% for women-owned. It's 5% for small disadvantaged businesses. The 3% for service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses has been increased to 5%. So it is no longer 3%; it's now 5%. And hub zone is still 3%. So let's just look at 2019 and their achievements. Well, they were able to meet their women-owned small business, but just barely. They were short on small disadvantaged businesses. They had a 5% goal, but they only achieved 4.17%. Now let's look at service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. If you're a veteran, you need a 0% disability letter to become a service disabled veteran. With respect to launching a service disabled, veteran-owned small business. They have a 5% goal, but in 2019 they could only achieve 1.95% of work share subcontracted by these large prime contractors who have large contracts. Only 1.95%. Hub zone is by far the worst. It is It's still 3% because they can't even come close. They'll never get to 3%. In 2019 it was 1.37%. In 2020, wow, they increased it to 1.65%. So it bounces up and down a little bit, but they can never even come close to meeting their goals. Now, I usually have people get really, really, really anxious when I say this. I tell people you've got to become one of these individual set-asides. Why? Because these are the ones that are very difficult to find enough of for their bid teams. And there's two parts. One is you have to be one of these set-asides, and then two, you got to be low risk. So let's just look at just being one of these things. Just being one of these things, you're going to be filling a slot where they just can't find enough of the kind of companies. Now, that's kind of intuitive. Like if they can't find enough hub zones, or if they can't find enough service disabled, better known small businesses, if you become one of those, guess what? You just got to show up and prove that you've got, the corporate maturity to be brought on their team, and you're in, because you're not competing, because there's not enough of them to actually compete for these things, for this work share. Now, again, people say, well, what if you're not a woman-owned small business, or if you're not a minority or in the 8A program or service disabled vet, what do you do? Well, that's fine. And the reason why that's fine is because this right here is the best one to have. It's hub zone. And hub zones are very easy. It's not easy, but it's very doable to become a hub zone when you're a startup. There's two main requirements to becoming a hub zone, and that includes you have to have an office in a hub zone space, and you also have to employ 35% of your workforce and who reside in a hub zone space. So if you're a one-person company and you live in a hub zone, guess what? Your home is your home office. So your office is in a hub zone, and you reside in a hub zone, and you're your only employee. So 100% of your employees reside in it. But what if you don't live in a hub zone? Well, you've just got to find a place that's about the size of a broom closet. It could be a room over a garage. It could be a spare bedroom in someone's house. It could be anything. As long as there's a lock on the door, you can claim that as an office. So if you're spending more than $200 a month on this, you probably didn't look hard enough. And then so that gives you the hub zone office space. And then the other one is you have to have 35% of your employees reside in a hub zone. So if you don't, that means that you have to hire another employee to give yourself two employees where that employee resides in a hub zone. And so what does employing a person mean? Well, it means that you are hiring them for 40 hours per month, not week, 40 hours per month, because they accept part-time employees, and that is the minimum part-time. It's 40 hours per month at minimum wage. So that's a few $100. So you need to show about 3 payrolls, and most people do payrolls, twice a month. So we're really talking about, 1.5 to 2 months worth of payrolls, so you can be able to provide that information on a hub zone application. So you've got a few $100 invested in this to becoming a hub zone. But what advantage does that give you? They are leaving literally billions of dollars of hub zone earmarks, subcontracting earmarks, on the table because they can't find enough hub zones who are low risk. Now, what do I mean by low risk? Why is risk so important? Well, let's go up here and take a look. This is how proposals are scored. Now, when your big company, Northrop Grumman, is writing their proposal, their score is going to end up being a series of colors. Each of the factors or section of the proposal is going to get a color. If it's unacceptable because they just screwed it up, it's just unacceptable because they didn't address all the requirements, or the risk was unacceptable, then you get a red. A marginal or yellow means like, oh man, you didn't meet all the requirements, but you got, most of them. Maybe you missed one, but we could turn a blind eye to that if you're the only bidder who scored as high as yellow. You know what I mean? It's just like you could theoretically win with the yellow, but you never will. So what happens if you beat all of the requirements? All of the requirements. Then you become a green. And you need to have something called evaluated strengths in order to get purples and blues. That means it was things that weren't asked for, but you provide. And those things add value to the government. And so therefore you're going to get an evaluated strength. You need one strength to get a purple and two to get a blue. But look at this. You're being evaluated by your technical response, your solution, and your risk. Risk is half of your proposal score. You could go out there and survey 100 small business owners, and I guarantee you 95% of them will not know that. That risk is half of their score. And that's why most small businesses fail to grow and be successful, because they do not understand the importance of risk mitigation to that. So how do you mitigate the perception of risk? If you're a small business, Northrop Grumman and the government are going to automatically assume that you are high risk, that you're risky. And honestly, it's true. You know what I mean? It's true. Yours truly, on my very first contract, I was literally 20 minutes away from not being able to pay my people on a payroll. So if you can't pay your people at payday, then they're going to be upset. They're going to tell the government, and next thing you know, you're kicked off the contract. And they're going to find another contractor who can pay their people on time. It's just that simple. So I was 20 minutes away from losing my very first prime contract. I got funding, literally 20 minutes before money was being taken out for payroll. That's how close. So when that perception is it's a reality. It really is. So you got to prove that you're not. So how do you prove that you are low risk? Well, you get a corporate credential that less than 1% of U.S. companies possess. That establishes that you are, that you are using industry best practices for your management systems. It's ISO 9001 certification. It literally is that simple. So these corporate credentials really help you out. The very first thing it's going to do is it's going to place you in the top of your set aside group. Again, it's going to put you in the top 1%. If you have 2 ISO certifications, you're typically in the top 0.1%. The other things they can do is it can really plus up your risk score, through corporate maturity. Basically, what this means is that if you have robust corporate infrastructure that you're required to have in order to become ISO certified, then you are a low risk company. So that's how it helps. So let's get back to this topic here. Give the customer what they want. And the customer in this particular case is Northrop Grumman. They need to have a small business utilization team for every one of their large bids. It all boils down to, hey, can they find small business set aside types and all the different flavors that they need that are sufficiently mature. So again, this right here is all the agencies that fall underneath the purview of the small business set aside program that have those goals. I wish I would have done that. And this is how well they're doing with their goals. If it's yellow, they didn't make them. Yellow is gold, which means opportunity for you. Look at all. Now we're starting out as subcontractors, so initially only look at the subcontracting, goals and how well that they did or did not do in achieving those goals. Look at all these yellows. What you want to do as part of your strategy is to figure out, which agencies align with what you want to do, in your horizontal service area that can't find enough of what type of set aside that you can become. And everybody can become a hub zone. So I kind of did this for my son. And so let's take a look at HHS. He wanted to do IT work as a hub zone. Why HHS, Health and Human Services? Well, one is they were meeting 0.6% of their subcontracting hub zone goals. 0.6. Now it's supposed to be 3. They were meeting literally 1/5 of their goal. So 80% of their hub zone subcontracting earmark was left on the table. 80%. And HHS did a lot of stuff that my son wanted to do with his company. And it was mostly IT related things. So, those NAICS codes that align with what he wanted to do, those represented a very significant percentage of their spend. Now, the next strategy is so you find these companies who are doing a ton of work with HHS, Health and Human Services, and you give them what they want. You give them your hub zone status. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that you got to do is you got to give them something that shows that you are a highly competitive, low risk small business. So what do? You get your hub zone. If you're a service disabled vet, then you're also, apply for that as well. You get some corporate credentials, and you throw in other things too, as much as you can. So this is kind of what we're talking about today. You want you Incorporated to look as sexy as possible, as low risk as possible, because low risk is sexy. So you're bringing them hard to find set aside statuses that you can obtain, and you're obtaining corporate credentials. Again, I help small businesses get corporate credentials for a fraction of what it costs them to go out, in the industry to find them and get them. Why? Is because I work exclusively with small business government contracting companies. I know it works for them. I don't play stump the chump where I tell you to try to figure something out and I tell you that it's wrong. I want to give you something that worked, that not only worked, but worked extremely well, that grew my company, because I got ISO 9001 in 2013. And then between 2013 and 2016, using my ISO 9001 compliant processes and procedures, we won nearly $400 million in prime contracts. They work. You know what I mean? I stand by that. They work. So you get a couple of these corporate credentials. ISO 9001 is the foundational one. You got to get that one first, because half of all your other credentials rests on ISO 9001. You got to have a quality management system. You got to have a risk management system. You have to have a change management system. You have to have all these things that are resident in ISO 9001. That makes getting a second and third credential ridiculously easy, especially for a small business. Why? Because ISO 27001, for example, information security management, 90% of that stuff doesn't even apply to you yet, because you don't have your own, wide area network. You're not operating your own Wi-Fi network. You don't have your own personal firewalls that you've created as a company. You don't have your own cloud. You're outsourcing that stuff. You're probably using a Google-based email system. You're probably using either a Google or a Microsoft cloud-based service like Google Drive or OneDrive with Microsoft. It's taken care. By outsourcing it, it removes all of these issues from you. And but you have a policy or procedure in place for when you do grow into those type of requirements. So getting these second certifications are very, very, very easy for a startup, but they are just wow. They have a lot of pop, because these large businesses, they see that and they say, "Oh my God, how can you do this? You got it going on. We're struggling to get our ISO 27001, and yet you're a small business and you have it. How did you do it?" You can say, "Well, we're just that good." But so this is basically what we just discussed. We talked about coming up with a strategy, and they were talking about giving them what they want, and they want the things that are orbiting around you Incorporated's logo. And it's as simple as that. Now, the next couple topics that we're going to be talking about is, you can have all these things, but unless people can see it with a compelling storefront, then you're not going to get too much business, because you can reach out to somebody, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about massive outreach. I'm going to show you ways to reach out to tens of thousands of business development executives who are looking for small businesses for their small business utilization team on their large company bids. And when you reach out to those people, the very first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to your storefront, your web presence, and your LinkedIn presence. And that's where they're going to learn about all these things. They're going to be presented on your storefront. And so your website is extraordinarily important. Your LinkedIn profile is extraordinarily important. Why? Because that's how people want to learn just how sexy you are as a company. They're not going to get it through osmosis. They're not going to believe it in an email. They got to see it. They got to see the logos on the website. You got to talk about it. You got to talk about your successes. You got to talk, they want to go to a small business website that just looks like every other billion-dollar company's website. Now, think about what I just said. As a small business owner, your storefront, your website can look just as impressive as any other billion-dollar company. Why? Because it's all in HTML code or Java or whatever they coded in now. It's easy. There's nothing special about it. It's all level of effort. It's all working through your website to make it look as ultra professional as possible. Now, there are certain landmines that a lot of small businesses step on, and we'll talk about that next week. But I just kind of wanted to get you through today. You got to give these business development executives what they want, what they need for their small business utilization bid teams. They need these hard to find set aside categories. And again, HubZone is the one that every small business owner can do, because it's dependent upon your company's office and your employees. If it's just you, then it's where you live. If you don't live in a HubZone, then you got to hire somebody for 40 hours a month at minimum wage. Very cheap. So you'll be able to become a HubZone. And like I said, that is the hardest one for them to find. So once they find a HubZone, then you got to prove that you've got it going on, that you're a low risk, very mature, small, HubZone. And that's where these corporate credentials come into play. Now, people always ask me this question, so I'll just answer it. Why does Northrop Grumman care if you're ISO certified? Like, aren't they certified, already? And the answer to that is absolutely. They got their ISO certifications held at Northrop Grumman. Maybe not their entire company, but they can pick a business unit that's ISO certified or CMMI appraised or whatever it is. They're a big company and they're ultra mature and they got it going on. So why do companies like IBM and Northrop Grumman care? If you have it, since they already have it. One, it shows that their small business utilization team is ultra mature. No matter how trusted IBM or Northrop Grumman is, they're at most only going to be able to do 70% of that contract. So who's doing the other 30%? That's what the government is thinking. They're saying, like, IBM, we get it. You're the best. You're Big Blue. We love you. IBM, you're the best. That's honest. The federal government, they have a love affair with IBM. They really do. But even IBM, they're only doing 70% of the work share on their own contracts. At least 30% is being done by small business, and that's what terrifies the government. Like, oh, what about that mystery? That mystery piece over here. What's in that? We know the 2/3 of the pie that you're doing that you're baking is delicious, IBM. We just want to make sure that the third of the pie that the small businesses are cooking up doesn't have mystery stuff in it. And so how do you do that? Well, this is what IBM says. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is what they're going to say in their proposal. They say, hey, we're IBM. You know us. You love us. We're the best there is. The 70% that we're doing on this contract, you can bank that. It's done. It's going to be done great. And then that because you know us and you love us. But you don't have to worry about the other 30% either. Why? Because we're IBM and we're smart. We went out there. We created the most capable, most mature, lowest risk small business team in industry. Our small business partners possess ISO 9001 certification, ISO 27001 certification, CMMI level 3 appraisal. They list all their credentials for their small businesses. And now they not only get a check block for having met that small business utilization requirement, but half of their proposal score is saved. Because remember, half of their proposal score in the technical/risk rating, lexicon of grading a proposal, half of it is risk. So they just solidified their risk rating as being very low risk, because I have seen on many, many, many occasions. I used to work for big businesses. I used to work for L3 and Unisys, both multi-billion-dollar companies. And when we didn't get our small business utilization plan right, it impacted our risk rating. It did. Because we, at most, were only going to do 70% of that. Even though we were low risk companies, again, we were only doing 2/3 of the work. What about the other third? Hell, the other third can sink a ship. You know what I mean? If 1/3 of your ship is filling with water, you're going to sink. It's just that simple. You can't keep the ship afloat. So, they've got to really solidify and make sure that third that's being done by small businesses is rock solid. So this is where Jonathan and I usually open this thing up to questions, and Jonathan usually comes up with some great questions. Let's see if we can hear them. No, I can do some lip reading. Wiggle the wire. Actually, just wiggle the wire. See if we can.
Nothing.
Yeah, I got you. Go. Talk fast.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway, hey, put it in a chat if you have any questions. I don't have access to anything, but if you have any good questions, put it in a way so I can see it on the chat, and we can go from there. Because like I said, I talk pretty fast and I go over this stuff, and much of this, I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. So for me, I gloss over some of the stuff that may not be able, that may be very new to a lot of folks. And Jonathan, he keeps me honest. He calls me out when I do stupid things like that.
Oh my gosh. Anything? Nothing?
Okay. So, well, I tell you what, there's no rule that we have to go for take up everybody's full hour, every single week. So what we can do is let me go back a little bit and talk about something that I think is vitally important. And no matter how much I stress it, it's never enough. And I totally mean that. And that is the mental component of launching a company. It is hard to launch a company. It's hard not because of all the knowledge you need to have. It's hard because nobody likes standing up and receiving rejections. It's frustrating. People like saying like, man, I don't know how to do this. I'm not doing it very well yet. And I'm getting a little bit of egg on my face. I'm seeing other people, they're more successful than me and they're getting it done. It's the emotional aspect of it. The technical piece of launching a small business represents, I won't lie to you, about 20% of the equation. And why do I say 20%? Because that 20% is somewhat unique to federal government contracting. If this was a regular company, hell, I would have said, it's 95%, emotional, overcoming mental obstacles. But because this is federal government contracting, it's a little bit different than everything else, but not that much. And it's those differences that make it such a great market space, because it eliminates, 95% of your natural competitors. Why do I say 95%? Well, because less than 5% of U.S. companies pursue federal government contracts. Less than 5%. That means if you were pursuing work, in the commercial sector, instead of having just 5% of your competitors competing against you, you'd have the full 100 competing against you. But you only have 5% of your natural competitors competing against you in the federal government. So that's why it's such a great industry. So there's that little bit of technical stuff that you get. That's the easy stuff. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is just actually doing it. And I'll tell you why, in my personal opinion, what why we have been taught to not want to do things like launch a company. And the reason why is because we are told that failure is not an option. So if you can't fail, then you won't fail. So what does that mean? That means that whatever your first attempt is, you're going to package it up as if it's a success. You're got a pig, and you're going to be putting lipstick on it and trying to make it look like it's really attractive when when it's a pig. It's ugly, but you never have any opportunities to make it better because we've been told failure is bad. Well, let me tell you something. Failure is the whole reason why my company succeeded. I failed miserably in 2003. I relaunched it again in 2006. And because of those failures that I had in 2003, it identified my knowledge gaps. And I went out there and I figured out what it was. Now, again, there was no training program like Government Contracting Academy back in the day. So I had to find jobs where I could learn this material through on-the-job training. But I learned it, and I launched my company again. So that happened in 2007, and I kept it through 2009 for like 3 years. And I went out of business again because there were still things I didn't know. So I failed that second time, but I failed for different reasons than the first one. I failed, because I didn't know how to scale. I didn't know how to, win prime contracts. So then I relaunched my company in 2010, and I won my very first prime contract. But again, I didn't know how to establish corporate infrastructure. So in about 2013, I was about this close to losing my one and only prime contract. So I did a ton of research, and I now was failing, and I was on the cusp of hard fail in 2013 when I made the decision to get ISO 9001, to use ISO 9001 as the framework to help build corporate infrastructure and maturity within my company. I did that. So those failures in 2003, 2009, basically 2013 led to me winning nearly $400 million in work prior to selling my company in 2016. It was those failures. There was nothing I could have ever learned in an MBA program or any type of program. I actually had to get my nose bloodied a little bit. You know what it cost me? It cost me a little bit of my ego. That's all it cost me. Because in this industry, you're not having to mortgage your house. You're not having to invest every single thing that you own, go into a ton of debt in order to buy a brick and mortar facility and hire 25 people and get millions of dollars in debt. You don't have to do that. This is, again, another reason why I love the federal government contracting industry so much. You don't have to make those investments until after you win the contract and you have guaranteed revenue coming in. So, I was able to learn, get my nose bloody, get my ego hurt a little bit, and then, learn from those failures or mistakes. I remember the very first time I had a meeting with Deloitte, and I was a small business owner, and I learned that what I was doing was called failing fast. And I didn't learn that until I was talking with the Deloitte executive, because I was trying to land Deloitte as a strategic partner. And she says, well, we have a fail fast strategy. And I laughed. I thought she was joking. It's like nobody wants to fail fast, So I literally thought she was joking, and she wasn't. And so I was like, oh man, hopefully I didn't offend her by laughing, But she says, when we go in with a client and we're implementing a solution, I want to get our first viable solution done as quickly as possible and immediately assume it's broken. And she says that does two things. One is it enables us to learn from the entire process of implementing the solution. And then two, if we immediately assume that it's broken, doesn't work, then it takes the stigma of failure away. That just became our first draft. And she says at that point, instead of putting a lipstick on the pig and making that try to work, we've learned from that experience. and we can either take that as a baseline and move forward with it, or we can do something different. She says, so we try to get in there and fail as fast as possible, to learn from it, so the next iteration will be tremendously better. So let's just say it took you, let's say you had to launch a large scale enterprise for your organization, and you go in there and you have two strategies. The first, you just get in there and you give it the old college try, and it takes you 6 months, and you got something up, and it's like, it doesn't really work that well. Well, what did you learn? Well, we really screwed this up, and boy, if we do it all over again, we'd have done this instead, and this right here, we did it, but there's a better way we can do it. So we can go back and fix that. And we really should do that. And so now you're at 6 months, and now you know exactly what you need to do. You know exactly what you need to do to make that a really solid enterprise system, enterprise solution. Or what you could do is you could spend 6 months studying and guessing about what you may or may not need to do. And then you do it. And you're going to find those same damn hiccups that you'll never learn in a book. Those are real world things. So get in there. You got to fail fast.
Fast iteration.
Did you talk about fallout money yet? What is fallout money yet? I'm not familiar with that term. Yeah,
Mike,
help with everybody? Can you?
Nothing from my microphone.
So anyway, I will say this: if you can overcome that mental obstacle, don't say I'm going to launch this company and it's got to be successful. Say, okay, this is my first try. This is my first try. People who quit smoking, you know how they quit smoking? Same way like you lose weight. You don't go on one diet, and that one diet is going to be successful, and it's going to take you from wherever you are to your dream weight. What's going to happen is you're going to start your diet, and you're going to be on that diet for a while, and then you're going to fall off the bandwagon. But in the process, you've lost a few pounds, but you're never going to forget that I need to lose weight. So a week later, you get back on the wagon again, and you start losing weight again, and you lose a little bit more. So nobody loses weight like this right here. It's more like this, It's an up and down squiggling line. It's not linear. Same way with quitting smoking. The way you quit smoking is you just never quit trying to quit. And ultimately, one of the tries are going to work for you. But while you're quitting, you're actually making yourself healthier too. It's going to make your next attempt that much easier. So that's how you got to approach it. You got to say, it's not like baseball. You don't have 3 strikes and you're out. You get to swing the bat as many times as you're willing to be embarrassed. So if you get a little bit of egg on your face, okay, I'll try it again. What's the worst that can happen? You get a little bit embarrassed, and nobody's looking, nobody cares. It's just like you're a teenager. When you're a teenager, you think the whole world is looking at you, and they've actually done tests like this. This is biologically, been proven. Like teenagers biologically think that the whole world, for whatever biological reason, is looking at them, and that they're on this stage. And for a lot of people, they kind of are. They feel like that way. If they're going through puberty or whatever it is, they feel like they are like really on the stage. But as an adult, you kind of realize that you're not. Like nobody gives a shit. There's half a dozen billion people in the world, and we're all too damn busy to give a shit to watch somebody fail or succeed. It's like nobody gives a shit about your luxury car, but you. So you can either drive around the luxury car to think that you're impressing everybody, when in reality they don't give a shit about your car. It's the same way with trying to launch a company and not being successful on your first, second, third, fourth, 10th, 20th chance. It only takes one to be successful. Only one. And that's kind of the strategy that I also pitch in Government Contracting Academy. Once you get to the point, and you can do that rather quickly, you can do that with one subcontract. With one subcontract, I start telling people, start swinging for the fence. Start swinging for those prime contracts, especially if you have corporate credentials that demonstrates that you are a mature, low-risk small business, because that's the number one variable in winning a large prime contract is whether or not you are low risk, And if you got corporate credentials, you are low risk. So I tell people to start bidding on those massive contracts. And let's just say you just give yourself a 10% probability of win. And, people always say, well, Randy, my God, that's stupid. Why am I ever going to bid on something that I have a 90% chance of losing? Well, because you got a 10% chance of winning. And if you make the commitment to say, I'm going to bid on 7 of these things with a 10% probability of win each, it's a coin flip of whether or not you're going to win one of those 7. It's a coin flip. You have a 50-50 chance of becoming a multimillionaire. Now, all of a sudden, that strategy doesn't sound too damn bad. Where I bid 7 times and it's literally a coin flip, whether or not you're going to become a multimillionaire. It's actually a lot better than that, because every single time you bid, your probability of success increases. Increases every single time, because you're getting better at it. You are getting better at your bids. And why? Because you're going to submit that bid and you're going to request a debrief. And the government's going to tell you, like, hey, we really liked your management section, but this section, man, you kind of need a little work on. So what do? You take the good, you polish that, keep that really good, and then you fix, and you do that. And you're establishing relationships. So maybe you couldn't get Deloitte on that first bid, but you got Deloitte on the second or third or fourth or fifth, because now you've done more massive outreach and they've got to know you better. And same way with the source selection boards. If you can keep those 7 bids within the same organization, it's like, oh my gosh, that first bid, they've never seen you before. The second bid is like, hey, didn't they bid last time? The third bid is like, oh yeah, they're bidding again. The fourth bid is like, hey, they're one of our groups that they're one of our usual companies. Now the source selection board, they're seeing you as an incumbent by that 7th bid. They think like, hey, that guy's one of us. You've never done a bit of work in that organization, but the people who decides whether you're going to win or lose, whether you're going to become a multimillionaire or not, are looking at you as if you're one of the regulars, one of the incumbents. So they're going to implicitly have more faith and confidence in you than they are if they saw your proposal for the first time and never recognized your brand. So you got to get out there and you got to swing. And you just got to. Jonathan, I didn't think that sign language was going to be a requirement for this webinar for us, but you picked it up rather nicely. We got 3 minutes. Anything you want to wrap up with? I'm pretty decent on lip reading.
I think we're good. We're good.
Okay, so next Tuesday, after Thanksgiving, and we hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving, holiday. But next Tuesday, we are picking back up with webinar number 3 of our 4-part series. And I'm telling you, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. But it's not. But I'll also say this too. It's completely not intuitive. You know what I mean? It's just not intuitive of what, people always think like, oh, I got to be an expert at this in order to be able to be competitive to win this. It's like, that has nothing to do with it. Doesn't matter about how good you are or how much you know about a field, because you're going to be partnering with a big company for that piece anyway, when you start bidding. So it's all about corporate credentials and projecting yourself as small business and finding the market spaces where they just can't find enough of you. That's the best fishing pier to fish off of, one where there's no other fishermen, and if you do that, you don't even have to be good. How about this? If you are the only hot dog stand outside of Yankee Stadium, and even though your hot dogs kind of suck, guess who's going to get a ton of hot dog business? You. Because people either going to the baseball game or leaving from is going to want a hot dog. And if you're the only hot dog stand, selling hot dogs, guess what? You're going to sell a lot of hot dogs. And it's the same way. You can't fish off the pier like everybody else. You know what I mean? You got to find market spaces where they just can't find enough of your particular set aside category. So that's all I have, and I think we just maxed out our time. So this is a pretty decent stopping spot. So anything you'd like to sign to the group there, Jonathan?
Okay. Just thumbs up.
Hey, no, I heard you.
What? Oh
no, you went out. So you're fading in and out. So this is kind of interesting. Okay, so that's all I have. I don't know if we can sign off early or whether or not this thing times out at exactly 1 hour.
We're good.